The root was dying. Jace Aldrich could feel it the way a man feels a pulled muscle. Not sharp, not sudden, but constant, nagging, present in every quiet moment when there was nothing else to focus on. He kept it in a sealed canister bolted to the console of the Pride's cockpit, wrapped in a strip of cloth his father had used to bandage Jace's hand when he was 6 years old and had touched something he shouldn't have in the lab. The cloth still smelled faintly of antiseptic and old machine oil. Some mornings, if you could call them mornings out here between stars, Jace would sit in the co-pilot seat with his coffee going cold beside him and just look at the canister, as if looking long enough might tell him something the instruments couldn't. The root was half a thing, a broken circuit, a torn page. His father held the other half somewhere across a galaxy that didn't want Jace to cross it. "You're doing it again," said Herc from the pilot seat, not looking up from the navigation display. He had a cigarette behind one ear and hadn't lit it in 3 days, which Jace had learned to treat as a barometer for the man's mood. 3 days unlit meant Herc was worried but managing, staring at the can. "It's not going to say anything back. I know. Your old man built you a radio for talking to him. Use that instead. Signal's still dead in this sector. Then sit back and let me fly, yeah?" Herc finally looked over. He had a face like a cliff face, heavy, weathered, carved by things that hadn't been gentle about it. He'd been a commando once, before he'd been a mercenary, before he'd been conned into this errand across the stars by an old wizard with a talent for transmuting lead. He still moved like a soldier when he thought no one was watching. "We'll be through the syndicate boundary in 6 hours, assuming the mines don't find us first." The monster mines had found them twice in the last 10 days. The first time, Jace had driven the armed force straight at a vine crawler the size of a building, while Oon screamed small, tinny screams from the passenger seat, and the quick draw laid covering fire behind them. The second time had been worse. They'd lost the rear deflector array and half a cargo bay door, and Flora had been unconscious for 4 hours afterward from the feedback of so many monster minds pressing against her senses at once. Flora was 13 years old, or she was infinitely older than that, depending on how you counted. She'd been grown from a seed in Jace's father's laboratory, something Jace still found difficult to frame in any way that felt real. And she could feel the monster minds the way other people felt weather. A pressure change, a shift in the air. She'd started waking up at night 2 days ago, sitting up in her bunk and saying nothing, just sitting there with her eyes open, and that expression on her face, like she was listening to something just below the threshold of human hearing. Jace had asked her what she was feeling. Them, she'd said. Closer than yesterday, he hadn't slept well since. The Pride of the Skies was not by any measure a beautiful ship. It was large and angular, and had been repaired so many times that the hull had a patchwork quality, different metals and compounds welded together in overlapping layers like geological strata. Herc treated it the way certain men treated their first car, with a combination of genuine affection and constant low-grade profanity. He knew every sound it made and what each sound meant. And he was the only person on board who could tell the difference between a concerning vibration in the port thruster and a non-concerning one. A distinction that had proven medically important on several occasions. It was despite everything home. That was the word that had crept up on Jace over the past year without him giving it permission. Home. He hadn't had one since his father's laboratory had been overrun, since the night everything green and wrong had come through the walls, and his father had pressed half a root into the hands of an old brass-colored robot, and said, "Go. Go now, take him and go." And the last thing Jace had seen before Oon pulled him through the corridor was his father's face, set and calm in the way of someone who has already made their decision and accepted what comes after it. He was still out there, his father. Audric Aldrich, agricultural genius, architect of his own catastrophe, the man who'd tried to end hunger and instead created hunger's teeth. He was out there transmitting signals through dead sectors and leaving coordinates in coded messages on stolen frequencies. And Jace was going to find him, and when he did, the two halves of the route would join, and the monster mines would end. That was the plan. It had been the plan for 14 months. He checked the canister again. 6 hours, Herc repeated. "I heard you." Then stopped looking at the can. Jace picked up his cold coffee and drank it. The syndicate zone announced itself with debris. Not the dramatic kind. Not wreckage and emergency beacons and the photogenic chaos of a space battle. Just junk. The slow accretion of 100 years of salvage operations and black market transactions. Broken hull plates, stripped engine casings, the skeletal remains of ships that had been stripped for parts until there was nothing left to strip. The Pride's proximity sensors began pinging at a rate that forced Herc to turn the volume down, and even then the sound was a constant, slightly irritating presence in the cockpit, like someone tapping a finger on a table and refusing to stop. "Lovely neighborhood," said Gillian from the doorway behind them. He was old. That was the first and most enduring thing about him. Not his white hair, or the staff he carried, or the faint luminescence that occasionally appeared at his fingertips when he was thinking hard, but simply the quality of age that hung around him like a second atmosphere. He was centuries old, or more. He had stopped counting, with any precision, somewhere around the time. Most civilizations currently in existence had been founding their first cities. He was Jace's mentor, and his father's oldest friend, and the one person on the ship that Herc genuinely couldn't argue with for more than 30 seconds without losing ground. "The Syndicate's beacon is active," Gillian said, moving to the secondary display with the slightly careful gait of a man whose body knew it was old even if his mind had given up arguing with it. "Which means Mira's crew is here. Which means we can pick up the signal coordinates Audric left with them. And Mira's crew is going to just hand those over," Herc said, "out of the goodness of their hearts. Mira's crew is going to hand them over because they're pirates, and pirates understand leverage, and we have something they want." Gillian touched the display and a schematic appeared, a piece of nav encryption software, compact and elegant, that could route a ship through any monitored sector without triggering a trace flag. He'd written it himself over the course of 3 weeks, while nominally helping Herc replace the damaged deflector array. Everyone wants something. The question is whether what they want is something you have. Herc looked at the schematic for a moment. "You should have been a criminal," he said. "I've had time to consider most careers," Gillian said. "I found I preferred the work I'm doing." The Pride entered the zone. Mira was not what Jace had been expecting, which he supposed was the point. She came aboard with 2 of her crew while a third held position in a fast interceptor off the Pride's starboard side, just close enough to make the geometry uncomfortable, and she moved through the cargo bay like she was taking inventory of everything, which she probably was. She had the kind of eyes that did that automatically, cataloging and valuing and filing away. She wore a jacket with too many pockets and a sidearm she didn't touch, but was very clearly aware of at all times. "Herc Storm Sailor," she said. "I heard you were dead." "Heard the same about you," Herc said. "Twice. 3 times, actually." Something crossed her face that might have been a smile in different lighting. The third was nearly true. There was a quality to the way they stood relative to each other. Not quite easy, not quite tense, the specific posture of people who had once trusted each other with something that mattered and had since revised that trust in opposite directions. Jace watched it and said nothing. Herc would do what Herc did, which was handle it the way he handled most things, by walking directly at it and seeing what happened. "We need the coordinates," Jace said. Mira looked at him for the first time. She had a way of looking that felt like assessment rather than observation. "Taking measurements." "You're the boy," she said. "Audric's son." "Yes, he spoke about you." She didn't elaborate. "The monster mines have hit 3 of our stations in the last month. 2 in the outer belt, 1 here in the zone. We've lost people." She said it flatly, without the inflection of grief which Jace recognized as the voice of someone who had processed grief so many times that it had worn down to a nub. "They're not just chasing you anymore, they're spreading." "I know," Jace said. "That's why I need the coordinates." "What you need and what you're going to get are 2 different conversations," Mira said. "Here's the thing about your father's coordinates. I've had them for 6 weeks. In those 6 weeks, 3 teams have tried to extract what's at those coordinates, the other half of whatever it is you're carrying, and all 3 have failed. Not failed as in retreated, failed as in gone. The monster mines know where it is. They're sitting on it." The cargo bay went quiet. Jace looked at the canister on his belt. He'd moved it there from the cockpit console 2 days ago, a decision that had been unconscious at the time, and that he'd only recognized as fear after the fact. "Then we go through them," he said. "With what?" Mira asked. "This ship and these vehicles," Jace said, "and whatever you're willing to bring." She looked at him for a long moment. Outside, through the cargo bay's small viewport, the debris of the Syndicate zone drifted past in slow, silent procession. "Your father," she said slowly, "said that if his son ever came, looking for the coordinates, I should give him a message before I gave him anything else." She reached into one of the many pockets and produced a data chip. He said, "The route knows where it needs to go. Trust the route." And then he said, She paused, and something in her voice shifted, something that had not been there before, something less armored. He said his son would probably argue with him, because his son had been arguing with him since he was 4 years old and was very good at it, but that he should try to listen this time. Jace took the chip. His hand was completely steady. He was proud of that. "I need you to show us where," he said. "I'll do more than show you," Mira said. "I'll take you there myself. But I want the nav encryption software. And I want it understood that what I'm doing for my people. Not for you. Not for whatever this is about." She gestured vaguely at the canister on his belt. "My people have been hit 3 times. I want it to stop." "It's the same thing," Jillian said from the doorway where he'd appeared without anyone noticing him arrive. "He had a talent for that, maybe," Mira said. "But the reason matters to me." "Then we understand each other," Jillian said. And he sounded like he meant it. What Audric had left was not just coordinates. The data chip contained a message, audio only 43 seconds long. Jace listened to it alone in the small compartment he used as a cabin. Really just a sleeping alcove and a fold-down desk, barely enough space to stand in. With the door sealed and the volume low enough that he had to hold the chip's speaker close to his ear. His father's voice. He'd known it would be on the chip. He'd still not been ready for it. Aldrich spoke the way he did most things. With precision and without wasted movement. The same quality he'd brought to his agricultural engineering. Where every variable had to be accounted for, because the thing you were making was going to feed people, and feeding people was not something you got to be approximate about. He said, "The root is the key," you said, "but the root is also a living thing, and living things respond to what surrounds them." He said, "The monster minds are not evil in the way we mean evil when we talk about people. They are a force, a function. They expand because that is their nature, and their nature came from a mistake I made. And I will spend whatever time I have left trying to correct it." He said, "When you find me, not if, when, because I raised you to commit to your sentences, we will join the root and it will end. And then we are going to go somewhere quiet for a while and I am going to make you dinner." He said this last part in exactly the same tone as everything else, and it was the tone that broke Jace open a little, just around the edges. He sat with the message for a while after it finished. Then he stood up, sealed the canister on his belt, and went to find the others. They were in the cargo bay. Mira had spread nav charts across a transport crate, and Herc was leaning over them with the unlit cigarette now behind his other ear, which Jace had no established data on. Jillian was seated on a secondary crate with the look he got when he was processing several threads of thought simultaneously and didn't want to be interrupted. Flora sat cross-legged on the floor with her eyes half closed and Un beside her, the small metal figure maintaining the posture of someone ready to bolt, that he always maintained in situations that were developing in concerning directions, which was most situations. Un had served Jace's father for decades. He was smaller than you expected, knee-high, armor-plated, magically animated, and prone to a specific kind of high-pitched distress that was simultaneously annoying and oddly endearing. He was also, in the 10 months Jace had known him, the most loyal thing in Jace's experience, in the way that only things that have committed entirely to a purpose can be loyal. He had carried half a route across a sector crawling with monster mines, and delivered it to a 16-year-old boy, and then stayed, which was the part that mattered. "The target is here," Mira said, pointing. "A dead system, 3 planets, no inhabitants. The mines have built a relay station on the 3rd planet, standard spread and hold formation. They're not there for the station. They're there because they detected something Audric left." "Another message," Herc said. "A beacon," Jillian said. He'd opened his eyes. "Your father would have needed to make physical contact to leave the second half of the route somewhere safe. He couldn't carry it through a sector that hot without being tracked. So he left it, and then left a beacon leading back to it, and then led the monster mines away from both." He paused. "The beacon is what they've found. The route itself is elsewhere on that planet." "You know this," Mira said. "I know, Audric," Jillian said. "Same thing." Jace looked at the chart. The planet was called, in the notation systems that covered this sector, something that translated roughly to Thirdstone, which was exactly as descriptive and exactly as unhelpful as it sounded. It was large, cold, with a thin atmosphere and a surface geography that the chart's survey data described as extreme. High, jagged ridges running in long parallel formations across most of the landmass, like something had raked the planet with enormous fingers. "How many mines on the ground?" Jace asked. "Surveillance puts it at 63 vehicle forms," Mira said, "plus the relay station, which has its own defensive systems. I have 6 interceptors and 2 heavy gunships. Your vehicles go atmospheric. All of them, Jace said, armed force included. Mira looked at the armed forces schematic on the secondary display. The vehicle was large, mechanically articulated, fitted with a grappling arm of considerable power. Something between a combat vehicle and a construction machine. Not built for speed but built for leverage. She looked at it the way combat pilots looked at equipment they hadn't used before. Not skeptical, just calculating. Command acknowledged, said the armed force, on cue, because Jace's communicator had been resting near the console and the vehicle had been listening. Mira looked at Jace. They respond to me, Jace said. It's a system my father built into them. He didn't fully understand it himself. The ring on his finger was part of it, a piece of the same magical engineering that had built Gillian's quickdraw and Flora's drill sergeant. But he'd stopped needing to understand it and started just trusting it somewhere around the 4th or 5th time it had kept him alive. All right, Mira said. She put her hands on the chart and looked at all of them in turn, the mercenary with the unlit cigarette, the centuries-old man on his crate, the girl sitting cross-legged on the floor, the anxious metal figure beside her, the boy with the canister on his belt. Here's how we do it. They dropped out of jump at the edge of the system at 0342 ship time, which was not quite the moment any of them had planned to arrive, but close enough. The Pride sensors immediately lit up with monster mine signatures, the relay station, a patrol formation in low orbit, 2 vine crawler configurations on the surface already moving, because the monster mines had sensors too, and they had been waiting. There it is, Herc said, very quietly. Third stone filled the forward viewport. It was pale gray-white, striated with the long parallel ridges, and from orbit it looked deeply inhospitable, which matched what it had done to the 3 teams Mira had sent. Cloud cover over the polar region, thin and fast-moving. The relay station's beacon pulsed on the sensors like a heartbeat. Flora, Jace said. Flora opened her eyes fully. 61 on the ground, she said. The other 2 are airborne. North quadrant, she paused. They know we're here. They knew before we jumped in. Saw boss, Jillian said. It wasn't a question. Not directly, Flora said. But something of his is here. Something old. She touched the floor of the cockpit with her fingertips, which was a gesture she made when she was reaching for something at the edge of her range. It's in the station. Whatever it is, it's in the station. Jace thought about this for exactly as long as he had. Mira, he said into the comm. Her voice came back immediately. Ready on your signal. We split the formation. Your interceptors take the orbital patrol. Your gunships go for the relay station. I need it down, or at least blind. We go atmospheric in the armed force and the trike. And the beacon? Mira asked. Jillian thinks the route is in the northern ridge system. The beacon's a decoy. We drive for the ridges while the station is occupied. A pause. Your plan requires the station to be occupied. Yes, that means someone has to occupy it. That's what the gunships are for. Another pause, shorter. I want that nav software uploaded before we go in. Already done, Jillian said pleasantly. He'd uploaded it while Jace was still listening to his father's message. All right, Mira said. Signal, said Jace. The Pride's cargo bay doors opened, and the armed force dropped into the atmosphere of Third Stone, and the sky above them exploded into a dozen different kinds of fire. Atmospheric entry in a ground combat vehicle was not an experience that ever became comfortable. The armed force shuddered and roared, and the heat shields did their job, which they always did, which Jace always forgot until the moment they needed to, and then remembered with a relief so sharp it was almost funny. Boone was in the passenger seat with both hands, gripping the frame and making no sound at all, which was either calm or a kind of fear so advanced it had gone silent. The planet's surface came up fast and the ridges were exactly as brutal as the survey data had suggested. Pale stone, jagged, running in long parallel lines like ancient wounds. The monster mines were already moving. Jace could see them on the tactical display. The green vehicle forms shifting into intercept patterns. The vine crawlers extending their reach across the rock. Herc's voice came over the comm from the spike trike somewhere to Jace's left and behind. 6 on our 6. 2 more coming around the north ridge. I see them, Jace said. What's the plan for ones we can see? Drive faster than them. Outstand tactical thinking, Herc said, in the tone he used when he meant the opposite. And the spike trike's engine hit a register that Jace associated with Herc deciding to do something inadvisable. The armed force was not a fast vehicle. It was the opposite of a fast vehicle. It was a vehicle built for leverage and endurance, and for getting its grappling arm around things that needed to be grabbed and pulled. and what it gave up in speed it theoretically compensated for, with the ability to carry the smaller vehicles if they needed to move terrain that the smaller vehicles couldn't handle. What Jace had not fully thought through was the 35 seconds between beginning the drive north and getting into terrain, where speed was not the relevant variable. He thought about it now very quickly, as a vine crawler the size of a house came around the eastern ridge, at an angle that would intercept them in approximately 20 seconds. Armed force, he said, deploy grapple. Command acknowledged. The arm came out, swung, locked onto a spar of rock to the left of the vehicle's path and pulled. The armed force didn't so much turn as rotate, a hard mechanical pivot that changed their vector by almost 40 degrees and put them into a narrow channel between two ridge formations that the vine crawler was too large to enter. The crawler hit the ridge wall, and Jace heard the impact even over the engine and the comm traffic, a sound like something wet hitting something very hard. Un finally made a sound. It was a small, compressed sound, the sound of someone who has been holding their breath long enough that the lungs begin to advocate strongly for their own interests. You're all right, Jace told him. Master Jace, Un said. I am cataloging a significant number of ways in which that description is optimistic. Keep cataloging. We're through. The channel opened into a broader valley, the ridges rising on either side, and on the far northern wall of the valley, where the stone had eroded into a deep overhang, the root signal came through clear and strong. Not on any instrument, but on the ring on Jace's finger, which had warmed to a heat he'd only felt once before, the day Un had first placed the half-root in his hands. There, Jace said. The comm crackled. Jillian's voice calmed. The relay station is down. Mira's people took it. But Jace, the thing Flora sensed, the old thing, it wasn't in the station. The station was the decoy. A sound behind them in the channel. A very large sound. Drive, Jillian said. Jace drove. What came through the channel behind them was not a standard monstermind vehicle form. It was larger, and it was faster, and it moved with a kind of purpose that the vine crawlers lacked, a directed intelligence, rather than the expansive, spreading logic of the smaller forms. It was dark, almost black, with the pulsing green at its joints that all monster minds carried, and it moved like something designed specifically for this terrain, for this chase, which was because it had been. Jace had time to think. Sawboss sent something specific. Then he didn't have time to think anything, because the channel walls were narrowing again, and the armed force was hitting its speed limits, and the thing behind them was not hitting any limits at all. Herc's voice, I'm coming around the east face. Give me 20 seconds. I have approximately 12, Jace said. Then slow down. Herc, Jace. Slow. Down. This was the part of working with Herc Stormsailor that required the most trust. Not trusting that he was competent, because Herc's competence was self-evident, but trusting that what looked like a terrible idea from the inside of a vehicle being pursued by something considerably larger and faster was actually a plan when seen from Herc's position. Jace had been developing this trust for 14 months, and he had not yet managed to make it feel natural, but he had managed to make it operational. He braked. The thing behind them closed the gap by 30 meters in 4 seconds. Un produced a sound that no one in the vehicle's designers had anticipated. The spike trike came off the east face ridge, at a speed that was technically reckless by any measure, and Herc had jury-rigged the front spike assembly into a configuration that was not included in any of Gillian's original schematics, which was to say he'd welded 3 extra spike points into a forward-facing lance arrangement that no combat engineer had approved, because no combat engineer had been present when he'd done it. The trike hit the pursuing vehicle at the join between its front drive assembly and its main body. The monster mind form lurched. It didn't stop. Nothing that size stopped from a single hit, but it lurched, and in lurching it scraped the channel wall, and the channel wall scraped back, and the specific angle at which the pursuing vehicle's front assembly was now offset from its main body was not an angle it had been designed to operate at. Jace had the grapple out before the thing had finished lurching. The arm caught. He drove. The pursuing vehicle came apart in sections. Not dramatically. It wasn't an explosion so much as a disarticulation, the mastermind's component form separating from its vehicle configuration as the two structures were pulled in directions they couldn't reconcile. The green at its joints went dark. The valley opened up ahead. The overhang was 30 meters away. Jace stopped the armed force under it, got out, and walked to the point where the ring's heat was strongest, which was a narrow shelf of rock that had been cut, deliberately, precisely, by a tool he recognized from his father's laboratory into a shape that would hold a canister of roughly the dimensions of the one on his belt. The other canister was there. He didn't open it. He held it in both hands for a moment and felt the two halves respond to each other through the containers. A vibration, barely perceptible, the way two tuning forks respond across a room, and he stood there with both hands full and thought, I found it. Not I found him. Not yet. But the first piece of the thing that would lead him there. He thought about his father's voice on the chip, the 43 seconds, the precision and the steadiness, and the brief departure from both when he said his son's name. I'm coming, he thought. Sit tight, I'm coming. He put the second canister on his belt but beside the first and walked back to the armed force. One was standing beside it with the posture of someone attempting to look composed and mostly succeeding. The relay station is fully down, he reported. Miss Flora says the monster mind signatures are retreating. Mira's interceptors have cleared the orbital formation. Herc is. Un paused, and his optical sensors tracked to something behind Jace. Herc is arriving. The spike trike came down the valley toward them at a speed that was reasonable for a vehicle that had just had a significant structural modification applied to it at high velocity, and therefore held up relatively well, which was Jace's reading of Herc's expression when he climbed out. Not unscathed but operational. You got it, Herc asked. I got it. Herc looked at the two canisters on Jace's belt. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the cigarette from behind his ear. The one he'd been carrying for 3 days, and held it up for a moment. Then put it back. That's one step, he said. One step, Jace agreed. We still need to find your father. Yes. And there's still several thousand monster minds between us and wherever he is. Yes. Herc put his hands in his jacket pockets and looked at the sky, which was the pale gray white of third stone in morning, just beginning to lighten towards something that was not quite dawn. All right, he said. Let's go tell the old wizard what we found. He'll probably already know. He probably will, Jace said. They went back to the Pride. Jillian did already know, or had deduced it, which was the same thing as far as results were concerned. He examined both canisters without opening them and said, with the serenity of someone confirming what they'd expected, that the resonance between the two halves was stable and strong, and that the root was not, in fact, dying. It had been dormant. Waiting, as living things wait when they are separated from what they need. When they join, Jillian said, it will not be a small event. How not small? Jace asked. I don't know precisely. I know what your father designed it to do. I know the mechanism. He set the second canister down on the examination table, with a care that Jace associated with things that were either very fragile or very powerful. I know that it needs both Audric and yourself present when it joins. That's not a mechanical requirement. That's a deliberate one. Your father wanted to be sure it was used the right way, at the right time. He built a check into it. The root knows where it needs to go, Jace said. Jillian looked at him. He said that in the message? Word for word. Then he's thought about it more than he shared with me. The old man sat back and did the thing he did when he was holding several threads simultaneously. He trusts you, Jace. Not just the way a father trusts a child. The way a scientist trusts a variable he's tested and found reliable. Jace didn't say anything. Outside the porthole, third stone was shrinking as the Pride climbed back toward the dark. Mira came through the door without knocking, which was her consistent approach to most doors. 2 of my people were hurt in the station assault, she said. Not badly, but hurt. She looked at the canisters on the table. Worth it, we think so, Jace said. She studied him for a moment. You're younger than I expected, she said. For someone carrying all of this. I'm older than I was, Jace said. She almost smiled. Audric said that too. About himself. She put a hand in her jacket pocket and leaned against the door frame. I'm not going back to the zone yet. If you're going after him, your father, I want to know where you're headed. My people have ears in places that might be useful. Mira, Herc said from somewhere down the corridor. Are you offering to help? I'm offering information exchange, she said loudly. Which is different. Is it? A pause that had the quality of an argument being weighed and declined. Possibly not, she said. Flora appeared in the doorway beside her, small and dark-eyed and still carrying that quality of listening. The monster minds that were here, she said. When they retreated, they went in a specific direction. North Galactic. Not random. Following orders, Jillian said. Reporting back, Flora said. There's something at the North Galactic point. Something large. She touched the doorframe with her fingertips. I don't think we're looking for your father in the direction the signal said. No? Jace said. I think your father moved, Flora said. I think he's been moving. And I think where he went. She paused. reaching for something at the edge of her range, is where the monster minds just came from. The Pride's engine hummed around them. Jace put both hands on the two canisters, one on each, and felt the resonance between them. That low, tuning fork frequency, patient and steady. Galactic, he said. North Galactic, Flora confirmed. He looked at Herc. Herc had retrieved the cigarette from behind his ear and was turning it between his fingers in the slow, deliberate way he did when he was committing to something. I'm still not getting paid for this, Herc said. No, Jace agreed. Herc put the cigarette back. All right, he said, North Galactic. How far, Flora said. Outstanding, said Herc. He walked back to the cockpit and began laying in the course, and Jace heard him talking to the ship the way he always did when he was working. The low private monologue of a pilot and his machine, half complaint and half instruction, comfortable as old furniture. The Pride's drive system began to cycle up. Oon appeared at Jace's elbow, which was his consistent way of appearing. Master Jace, he said, I want to note for the record that I am prepared to continue. I know, Oon. And that the events on Third Stone, while stressful, were within parameters I am willing to classify as manageable. That's good to hear. And that. He paused in the way Oon paused when he was reaching for something that his original programming had not been built to accommodate. And that I believe your father chose wisely when he sent me to you. Jace looked at the small metal figure, the brass-colored, slightly dented, enormously loyal robot that his father had trusted with the first half of a route and then with his son's life, in that order. He chose the best squire he had, Jace said. Oon straightened to a height that was slightly taller than his chassis technically allowed. Command acknowledged, he said. The Pride jumped. Somewhere in the dark between stars, in the direction that was North Galactic. A scientist who had made one enormous mistake and spent every day since trying to correct it, sat in a room he'd built from salvage and willpower, and watched a signal pulse that he'd calibrated to the specific frequency of a route he'd split in two, and felt the pulse change. Both halves were moving, together, same ship, same heading. He put his hand over the second canister. His half, the half he'd carried across more sectors than he could count now, the half that would only fully wake when it met the other one. And he felt it respond to the signal, the same low resonance that was the route's version of recognition. They were coming North Galactic. He reached for the transmission array and began encoding a message. He didn't have words for what he was feeling, not quite. He was a precise man, a man who distrusted approximations, but what was in his chest right now was not something precision touched. His son had found it. His son was coming. He encoded the message and sent it on the frequency only two living people knew. And then he sat back in the room he'd built from salvage and willpower. And for the first time in 14 months he let himself feel the thing he'd been declining to feel. Because feeling it, while it was uncertain, would have been a vulnerability he couldn't afford. He let himself feel that it was going to work. That was the human thing about it. Not the route, not the ring, not the engineering, the hope, the specific, irrational, evidence-resistant human quality of deciding that the distance could be crossed, and the pieces could be joined, and the mistake could be corrected. And then getting up and moving toward that belief every single day until the distance was less and the pieces were closer, and the thing you decided was true revealed itself to be so. The monster minds did not have that. They expanded and consumed and moved by the logic of appetite, which was efficient and relentless, and would have won, should have won, by every of force, except for the irrational variable of a boy on a badly repaired ship moving North Galactic with both halves of a route and a mercenary who wouldn't go home, and a centuries-old wizard, and a girl made of flowers, and a small, loyal, slightly dented robot who had been given one job and had not stopped doing it. The signal pulsed. He watched it and waited, the way he'd learned to wait. Not passive, not resigned, but active in the way of something coiled and ready, maintaining the discipline of patience, while everything in him was already running toward the door. They were coming. He began to prepare.